Every great love story begins with a spark, a moment when two souls collide and believe they've found their forever. For Elizabeth Pothast, a young woman from Florida, and Andrei Kastrovet, a man from Moldova with a bold personality and unshakable confidence, that spark ignited on the hit reality show 90 Day Fiancé. Their romance was fast, passionate, and filled with promises of a shared future. But behind the smiles and televised affection, there was always an undercurrent of tension, cultural differences, family interference, and the weight of expectations. Yes, you heard correctly. Andrei Kastrovet wanted to move back to his home country, Moldova, with his family to start a new life and build a business there. However, Elizabeth clearly stated that she could not leave her job, her family, and the stability of life in America. For a long time, there had been an invisible wall between Elizabeth and Andrei, caused largely by interference from Elizabeth's family. Elizabeth's mother accused Andrei of insulting her and speaking to her in a disrespectful manner. Angered by the situation, Elizabeth's mother told her daughter firmly, "Elizabeth, if you don't divorce your husband Andrei Kastrovet, then from today, you are no longer my daughter. I will not recognize you as my child anymore." Due to such conflicts and family disputes, the couple decided to separate. Finally, after 8 years of marriage, their relationship came to an end because of ongoing family issues. On October 25, their divorce was finalized by the court. Afterward, Andrei Kastrovet, aiming to start a new life and plan for his future, married an Indian woman. But the story didn't end there. Elizabeth filed a lawsuit against Andrei Kastrovet, accusing him of borrowing $35,000 from her and never repaying it. Based on her complaint, the court launched an investigation, and Elizabeth's allegations were proven true. Subsequently, the court ordered Andrei to pay a fine of $40,000. This is not just a tale of love lost. It is a saga of pride, betrayal, and resilience. A story that reminds us how quickly passion can turn into pain, and how family ties can both protect and destroy. Let's start from the beginning. Elizabeth Pothast was no stranger to romance, but when she met Andrei Kastrovet, something felt different. Their connection was immediate, magnetic, and undeniable. Andrei's Moldovan charm and strong personality drew Elizabeth in, while her warmth and openness gave him a sense of belonging in a foreign land. Their relationship blossomed quickly. Within months, they were inseparable, sharing dreams of building a life together. Elizabeth admired Andrei's confidence. He was a man who knew what he wanted and wasn't afraid to pursue it. Andrei, in turn, was captivated by Elizabeth's loyalty and her ability to see beyond his rough edges. When they appeared on 90 Day Fiancé, their love story became public. Viewers watched as they navigated the complexities of cross-cultural romance. Elizabeth's family expressed skepticism from the start, questioning Andrei's intentions and his ability to provide. But Elizabeth stood firm, defending her fiancé and insisting that their love was real. The couple's wedding was a celebration of hope. Surrounded by family and cameras, Elizabeth and Andrei promised to stand by each other through thick and thin. For a time, it seemed like they might defy the odds. They laughed together, traveled together, and welcomed the joys of married life. Yet beneath the surface, cracks were already forming. Andrei's desire to return to Moldova lingered like a shadow over their happiness. Elizabeth, deeply tied to her American roots, struggled to imagine leaving behind her career and her family. These differences were not yet explosive, but they were seeds of conflict waiting to grow. Still, in those early years, love was enough to silence the doubts. Elizabeth and Andrei believed they could overcome anything. Their story began with passion, resilience, and the promise of forever, a promise that, as we will see, would be tested in ways neither of them could have imagined. From the very beginning, Elizabeth and Andrei's relationship was marked by the collision of two worlds. Elizabeth was raised in Florida, surrounded by the comfort of her close-knit family and the stability of American life. She valued her career, her independence, and the sense of security that came with living in the United States. Andrei, however, carried with him the traditions, values, and ambitions of Moldova, a country where family ties were strong, but where opportunities often required grit and determination. Andrei's dream was simple in his eyes, yet monumental in Elizabeth's. He wanted to move back to Moldova. He envisioned building a business there, raising their children in his homeland, and living a life that reflected his roots. To him, Moldova represented authenticity, pride, and a chance to prove himself outside the shadow of Elizabeth's family. He often spoke of the rolling hills, the traditions, and the community he longed to return to. But for Elizabeth, the idea was terrifying. Leaving America meant abandoning her career, her financial stability, and most importantly, her family. She had grown up with her parents and siblings always nearby, and the thought of being thousands of miles away felt like cutting off a part of herself. To Elizabeth, Moldova was not a dream. It was a risk, a leap into uncertainty that she wasn't prepared to take. This difference in vision became a recurring point of tension. Andrei would argue passionately about the opportunities waiting for them in Moldova, insisting that he could build a future there. Elizabeth, equally firm, would remind him of the life they had already established in America. Their conversations often ended in frustration, with neither willing to compromise. The cultural clash extended beyond geography. Andrei's Moldovan upbringing emphasized traditional gender roles, where the man was expected to lead and the woman to follow. Elizabeth, however, had been raised in a society that valued equality and independence. She bristled at Andrei's commanding tone, while he grew impatient with what he saw as her reluctance to trust his vision. Family gatherings only amplified the divide. Elizabeth's relatives viewed Andrei's insistence on Moldova as selfish, accusing him of trying to isolate her from them. Andrei, in turn, felt judged and disrespected, believing that Elizabeth's family never truly accepted him. What might have been a private disagreement between husband and wife became a public battle, with every family dinner turning into a debate about their future. Despite the tension, Elizabeth and Andrei tried to keep their marriage afloat. They reminded themselves of the love that had brought them together, the laughter they shared, and the dreams they once held in common. But the Moldova dream lingered like a storm cloud, casting shadows over their happiness. In many ways, this chapter of their lives was not just about a place on the map. It was about identity, belonging, and the sacrifices each was willing to make for love. For Andrei, Moldova was a symbol of pride and self-determination. For Elizabeth, America was a symbol of stability and family. Neither was wrong, but together, their visions were irreconcilable. And so, the seeds of conflict continued to grow. What began as a difference in dreams slowly hardened into resentment, setting the stage for the battles that would eventually tear them apart. Every marriage faces challenges, but for Elizabeth and Andrei, the greatest obstacle wasn't just cultural differences or conflicting dreams. It was the constant interference of Elizabeth's family. From the earliest days of their relationship, her relatives had voiced doubts about Andrei. They questioned his motives, his temper, and even his ability to provide. What might have been private disagreements between husband and wife quickly became public battles, fought at family dinners, holidays, and even on camera. Elizabeth's mother, in particular, became the loudest critic. She accused Andrei of speaking to her in a disrespectful manner, claiming that his blunt Moldovan style crossed the line into insult. Andrei, proud and unyielding, refused to soften his words. He believed he was simply being honest, but to Elizabeth's mother, his tone felt dismissive and arrogant. Each exchange left scars, deepening the rift between Andrei and the family he had married into. Elizabeth found herself trapped in the middle. On one side was her husband, the man she had chosen to build a life with. On the other was her mother, whose approval and love had always been central to her identity. The tension was unbearable. Every time Elizabeth tried to defend Andrei, her family accused her of being blind to his flaws. Every time she sided with her family, Andrei accused her of betrayal. The invisible wall between Elizabeth and Andrei grew taller with each passing year. It wasn't built overnight, but brick by brick, through arguments, accusations, and ultimatums. Andrei began to feel like an outsider in his own marriage, convinced that Elizabeth's loyalty was divided. Elizabeth, meanwhile, felt torn apart, forced to choose between the man she loved and the family she could never abandon. The situation reached a breaking point when Elizabeth's mother confronted her directly. In a moment of anger and desperation, she delivered a devastating ultimatum. "Elizabeth, if you don't divorce your husband Andrei Kastrovet, then from today, you are no longer my daughter. I will not recognize you as my child anymore." Those words echoed like thunder in Elizabeth's mind. It was no longer just about disagreements or cultural clashes. It was about identity, belonging, and the threat of losing her family forever. For Andrei, the ultimatum was proof that he would never be accepted. For Elizabeth, it was a wound that cut deeper than any marital argument. From that day forward, the marriage was never the same. The invisible wall had become a fortress, separating husband and wife in ways neither could fully repair. Love still existed, but it was overshadowed by resentment, fear, and the constant reminder that their union was under siege. Family interference had turned what should have been a partnership into a battlefield. And as the years passed, the cracks in their marriage widened, setting the stage for the painful decisions that lay ahead. The tension between Elizabeth and Andrei had been simmering for years, but it was Elizabeth's mother who finally lit the fuse that would explode their marriage. What began as subtle disapproval and whispered warnings escalated into open hostility. Every family gathering became a battlefield, every conversation a test of loyalty. Andrei's blunt Moldovan manner clashed violently with Elizabeth's mother's expectations of respect and gentleness. For Elizabeth's mother, the issue was not just cultural differences, it was personal. She believed Andrei spoke to her with arrogance, dismissing her opinions and undermining her authority as the matriarch of the family. To her, this was unforgivable. She saw her daughter slipping further into Andrei's world, and she feared losing her influence over Elizabeth altogether. The breaking point came during a heated confrontation. Elizabeth's mother, her voice trembling with anger, delivered words that would forever change the course of her daughter's life. "Elizabeth, if you don't divorce your husband Andrei Kastrovet, then from today, you are no longer my daughter. I will not recognize you as my child anymore." The ultimatum was brutal, cutting deeper than any insult Andrei had ever thrown. Elizabeth stood frozen, her heart pounding, torn between two worlds. On one side was her husband, the man she had promised to love and honor. On the other was her mother, whose approval and love had shaped her entire life. Andrei's reaction was immediate. He saw the ultimatum as proof that Elizabeth's family would never accept him, no matter what he did. To him, this was not just an attack on their marriage. It was an attempt to destroy his identity as a husband and father. He grew defensive, angry, and more determined than ever to assert his independence. Elizabeth, however, was devastated. The ultimatum forced her into an impossible position. If she chose Andrei, she risked losing her family forever. If she chose her mother, she would betray the man she had built her life with. The pressure was unbearable, and the cracks in her marriage widened into chasms. The fallout was immediate. Elizabeth began to withdraw emotionally, struggling to reconcile her loyalty to her husband with her fear of losing her mother. Andrei, feeling betrayed, accused her of siding with her family. Their arguments grew more frequent, more bitter, and more destructive. The ultimatum didn't just challenge their marriage, it poisoned it. Every interaction became a reminder of the choice Elizabeth was being forced to make. The invisible wall that had once separated them now became a fortress, reinforced by her mother's words. In the end, the ultimatum was not just a demand, it was a declaration of war. Elizabeth's mother had drawn a line in the sand, and Elizabeth was left standing in the middle, unable to move forward without breaking someone's heart. This moment marked the beginning of the end. The love that had once carried Elizabeth and Andrei through cultural clashes and family disputes was now overshadowed by resentment, fear, and the looming threat of permanent separation. The ultimatum was more than just words. It was the weapon that shattered their marriage. The ultimatum from Elizabeth's mother was not just a moment of anger. It was the spark that ignited a firestorm inside Elizabeth and Andrei's marriage. What had once been a partnership built on love and resilience now began to crumble under the weight of resentment, mistrust, and constant conflict. Elizabeth found herself emotionally torn apart. She loved Andrei, but the words of her mother echoed in her mind every single day. "You are no longer my daughter." That sentence was a wound that refused to heal. She tried to carry on with her marriage, but her heart was divided. Every time she looked at Andrei, she saw the man she had chosen. Every time she spoke to her mother, she felt the guilt of betraying her family. Andrei, meanwhile, grew increasingly frustrated. He believed Elizabeth should stand firmly by his side, no matter what her family said. To him, loyalty was absolute. A wife should defend her husband against the world. But Elizabeth's hesitation, her constant attempts to balance both sides, felt like betrayal. He accused her of weakness, of allowing her family to control their marriage. Arguments became routine. What once was small disagreements about money, work, or daily life now escalated into explosive fights. Andrei's temper flared, his voice rising in anger, while Elizabeth's tears flowed more often than ever before. Their home, once filled with laughter and warmth, became a battlefield of accusations and silence. The Moldova dream resurfaced in these arguments, adding fuel to the fire. Andrei insisted that moving back to his homeland would solve everything. Away from Elizabeth's family, away from their interference, they could finally live in peace. Elizabeth, however, saw it differently. To her, Moldova was not an escape but a prison, cutting her off from the very people who had raised her. The clash of visions became symbolic of their deeper divide. Andrei wanted independence, Elizabeth wanted connection. Friends and relatives noticed the change. The couple who once radiated passion now seemed exhausted, drained by the constant tension. Elizabeth's siblings whispered about Andrei's arrogance, while Andrei's friends in Moldova told him to stand his ground. The marriage was no longer just between two people. It had become a war fought on multiple fronts, with everyone taking sides. Elizabeth tried to hold on to hope. She remembered their wedding vows, the promises they had made, and the love that had once felt unbreakable. But each day, the cracks widened, trust eroded, respect diminished. The bond that had carried them through cultural differences and family disputes was now fragile, hanging by a thread. Andrei, too, felt the weight of failure. He had entered the marriage believing he could build a life with Elizabeth, but now he saw only obstacles. His pride, his stubbornness, and his refusal to bend had created walls that love could no longer climb. By the time 8 years had passed, the cracks in their marriage were no longer cracks, they were chasms. The couple who had once believed they could overcome anything now faced the reality that love alone was not enough. The foundation of their relationship had been shattered, and the path ahead was leading them toward an inevitable end. By the time 8 years had passed, Elizabeth and Andrei's marriage had become a fragile shell of what it once was. The love that had carried them through cultural clashes, family interference, and countless arguments was now buried beneath layers of resentment and exhaustion. The ultimatum from Elizabeth's mother had left a permanent scar, and the cracks in their relationship had widened into chasms too deep to repair. Elizabeth felt trapped in a cycle of pain. Every day was a balancing act between her loyalty to Andrei and her devotion to her family. She tried to convince herself that love could conquer all, but the constant battles drained her spirit. The laughter that once filled their home was replaced by silence, broken only by arguments that seemed to repeat themselves endlessly. Andrei, too, was weary. His pride had kept him fighting for years, but even he began to see that the marriage was no longer sustainable. He felt like an outsider in Elizabeth's world, constantly judged and rejected by her family. His dream of returning to Moldova had become more than just a vision. It was now an escape, a way to reclaim his identity and start fresh. The final decision came not in a dramatic explosion, but in a quiet moment of clarity. Elizabeth and Andrei sat together, exhausted from yet another argument, and realized that they had reached the end of the road. The bond that had once been unbreakable was now irreparably damaged. They could no longer ignore the truth. Their marriage had failed. Elizabeth's tears flowed freely as she admitted that she could not continue living in constant conflict. She loved Andrei, but the cost of staying married had become too high. The pressure from her family, the resentment in her heart, and the endless arguments had drained her of hope. For the first time, she allowed herself to imagine a life without him, a life where she could breathe again. Andrei, though angry and hurt, accepted the reality. He had fought for years to prove himself, but he knew that Elizabeth's loyalty would always be divided. He could not build a future with someone who was torn between him and her family. With a heavy heart, he agreed that separation was the only way forward. The decision was devastating, but it was also liberating. For Elizabeth, it meant freedom from the constant tug-of-war between her husband and her family. For Andrei, it meant the chance to start anew, to pursue his dreams without the shadow of disapproval hanging over him. Their separation was not marked by hatred, but by sorrow. They had loved deeply, but love alone was not enough. The invisible wall that had grown between them had finally become insurmountable. And so, after 8 years of marriage, Elizabeth and Andrei chose to walk separate paths. It was the end of a chapter that had once promised forever. The decision to separate was not just about ending a marriage. It was about acknowledging the truth, facing reality, and choosing survival over suffering. The decision to separate was painful, but the true weight of finality came when Elizabeth and Andrei stepped into the courtroom. After 8 years of marriage, their love story had reached its breaking point. And now, the law would decide what remained of their union. On October 25, the day of their divorce hearing, the atmosphere was heavy with tension. Elizabeth arrived with quiet determination, her face pale but resolute. She had spent years torn between her husband and her family, and now she was ready to close that chapter. Andrei, on the other hand, carried himself with the same pride that had defined him from the beginning. His posture was rigid, his expression unreadable, but inside he wrestled with anger and disappointment. The courtroom was filled with silence, broken only by the shuffle of papers and the voices of attorneys. For Elizabeth, the proceedings felt surreal. She remembered the vows she had once spoken, promises of forever, of loyalty, of love, and now those words were being undone by legal documents. For Andrei, the process was humiliating. He had fought to prove himself as a husband, but now he was being reduced to a case number, a man whose marriage had failed. The judge listened patiently as both sides presented their arguments. There were discussions of finances, custody arrangements, and the division of assets. Each detail was dissected, each memory reduced to a line in a legal file. Elizabeth's family stood firmly behind her, offering support and validation. Andrei, however, felt isolated, convinced that the system, like her family, was stacked against him. When the judge finally delivered the verdict, the words were simple but devastating. The marriage of Elizabeth Pothast and Andrei Kastrovet was officially dissolved. The gavel struck, and with that sound, 8 years of love, struggle, and sacrifice came to an end. Elizabeth's tears flowed silently as she left the courtroom. She felt both grief and relief. Grief for the love she had lost, relief for the freedom she had gained. For her, the divorce was not just the end of a marriage, but the beginning of a new life where she no longer had to choose between her husband and her family. Andrei, however, walked out with bitterness in his heart. He believed he had been wronged, that Elizabeth's family had poisoned their marriage and pushed her into this decision. To him, the divorce was not just a legal ruling, it was a betrayal, a wound that would take years to heal. The finalization of their divorce marked a turning point. Elizabeth and Andrei were no longer husband and wife, but two individuals forced to rebuild their lives separately. The courtroom had stripped away the illusions of love and left only the reality of conflict, resentment, and loss. For Elizabeth, the path ahead was uncertain but filled with possibility. For Andrei, the road was darker, clouded by anger and the need to prove himself once again. The gavel had fallen, but the echoes of their marriage would linger long after the courtroom doors closed. After the gavel fell in the courtroom and the marriage was officially dissolved, Andrei Kastrovet faced a crossroads. For 8 years, He had fought to prove himself in America, to build a life with Elizabeth despite the constant interference of her family. But now, with the divorce finalized, he was free to choose a new path, free to return to the place he had always called home, Moldova. For Andrei, Moldova was more than just a country. It was a symbol of identity, pride, and belonging. He had always believed that life there would be simpler, more authentic, and free from the judgment he had endured in America. And so, with determination in his heart, he packed his bags and left behind the United States, ready to rebuild from the ground up. Back in Moldova, Andrei sought to start fresh. He reconnected with old friends, revisited familiar streets, and embraced the traditions that had shaped him. But he knew that starting over meant more than just returning home. It meant creating a new family, a new future. Andrei soon remarried, choosing an Indian woman as his partner. Their union was quiet, away from the cameras and the drama that had defined his first marriage. For Andrei, this was not just a second chance at love, but a chance to prove that he could build a stable life without interference. His new wife brought with her a different perspective, one rooted in resilience and cultural richness. Together, they began to plan for the future, a business venture, a home, and the possibility of children. Andrei believed that this time, things would be different. He would not allow outsiders to dictate the course of his marriage. He would lead with strength, and he expected loyalty in return. Yet, even as he tried to move forward, the shadow of his past lingered. In Moldova, whispers of his failed marriage followed him. Some saw him as a man who had been wronged by his in-laws, while others viewed him as arrogant, unwilling to compromise. Andrei carried these judgments with him, but he refused to let them define his new life. For Elizabeth, watching from afar, Andrei's remarriage was a bitter pill to swallow. Though their marriage had ended, the speed with which he moved on left her questioning everything. Had he truly loved her? Had their 8 years together meant less than she believed? These questions haunted her, fueling the resentment that would later drive her to take legal action against him. Andrei, however, remained focused on his new beginning. He poured his energy into building a business, determined to prove that he could succeed on his own terms. Moldova offered him the freedom he had always craved, and his new marriage gave him the stability he had long desired. But as we will see, the past has a way of catching up. Elizabeth was not finished with Andrei. Though he had remarried and started anew, she carried with her a grievance that would soon explode into yet another courtroom battle. For now, though, Andrei believed he had escaped. He had left behind the pain of America, the disapproval of Elizabeth's family, and the bitterness of divorce. In Moldova, with his new wife by his side, he felt ready to reclaim his life. Just when it seemed that Elizabeth and Andrei's story had reached its conclusion with divorce and separation, a new chapter of conflict emerged, one that would drag them back into the courtroom and reignite old wounds. Elizabeth, though free from the marriage, carried with her a grievance that refused to fade. She claimed that during their years together, Andrei had borrowed $35,000 from her. Money, she said, was meant to support his business ambitions and personal expenses. According to Elizabeth, Andrei had promised to repay the debt, but he never did. The divorce may have ended their marriage, but the financial betrayal lingered like a shadow over her new life. For Elizabeth, the lawsuit was not just about money. It was about justice, about holding Andrei accountable for what she believed was a deliberate act of deceit. She felt that he had taken advantage of her loyalty, using her trust to secure funds he never intended to return. Filing the lawsuit was her way of reclaiming power, of proving that she would not allow herself to be manipulated any longer. Andrei, however, saw the situation differently. From his perspective, the money had been part of their shared life, not alone. He argued that Elizabeth had willingly supported him, as spouses often do, and that her accusations were nothing more than an attempt to tarnish his reputation after the divorce. To him, the lawsuit was vindictive, a continuation of the family interference that had destroyed their marriage. The courtroom once again became the stage for their battle. Elizabeth presented evidence of the alleged loan, detailing the financial transactions and the promises Andrei had made. Her attorneys painted a picture of betrayal, portraying Andrei as a man who had exploited his wife's trust for personal gain. Andrei fought back, insisting that the claims were exaggerated, that Elizabeth was twisting the truth to punish him. He maintained his pride, refusing to admit fault, but the weight of the evidence began to press heavily against him. Witnesses, documents, and timelines all seemed to align with Elizabeth's version of events. The trial was grueling, reopening wounds that had barely begun to heal. Elizabeth sat in the courtroom, her face a mask of determination, while Andrei's frustration grew with each passing day. The tension was palpable, the air thick with resentment and unresolved anger. In the end, the court sided with Elizabeth. The judge ruled that her allegations were proven true. Andrei had indeed borrowed the money and failed to repay it. The verdict was clear. Andrei was ordered to pay a fine of $40,000, a sum that included the original debt and additional penalties. For Elizabeth, the ruling was a victory, a validation of her pain and her fight for justice. For Andrei, it was a crushing blow, a public humiliation that reinforced the narrative of betrayal and failure. The lawsuit marked yet another turning point in their saga. What had begun as a love story had now devolved into a battle of debts, accusations, and courtroom verdicts. Elizabeth had won, but the scars of the conflict would remain. Andrei, once proud and defiant, was now burdened with the weight of financial defeat and the stain of dishonor. Their story, already filled with heartbreak, had taken yet another tragic turn. The courtroom had once been the place where Elizabeth and Andrei's marriage was dissolved, but now it became the stage for yet another battle, this time over money, trust, and betrayal. Elizabeth's lawsuit against Andrei had shaken the foundations of their already fractured relationship, dragging them back into the spotlight and forcing them to confront the ghosts of their past. Elizabeth entered the courtroom with determination etched across her face. For her, this was not just about recovering $35,000. It was about proving that Andrei had taken advantage of her loyalty, that he had betrayed her trust, and that he should be held accountable. She carried with her documents, timelines, and evidence that painted a clear picture of financial deceit. Andrei, however, remained defiant. He'd argued that the money was never a loan, but part of their shared life together. He insisted that Elizabeth was twisting the truth, using the lawsuit as a weapon to punish him for the failure of their marriage. His pride would not allow him to admit fault, and he fought back with every ounce of stubbornness he possessed. The trial was tense, filled with heated exchanges and emotional testimonies. Elizabeth's attorneys presented bank records and communications that supported her claims. They argued that Andrei had borrowed the money under the promise of repayment, but had failed to honor his word. Witnesses corroborated her story, strengthening her case. Andrei's defense faltered under the weight of evidence. His explanations seemed thin, his arguments unconvincing. The judge listened carefully, weighing both sides, but the facts were clear. Elizabeth's allegations were not just accusations, they were proven truths. When the verdict was finally delivered, the courtroom fell silent. The judge ruled in Elizabeth's favor, declaring that Andrei had indeed borrowed the money and failed to repay it. The punishment was swift and decisive. Andrei was ordered to pay a fine of $40,000, a sum that included the original debt and additional penalties. For Elizabeth, the ruling was a moment of vindication. She had fought tirelessly to prove her case, and now the law had sided with her. The fine was more than just financial compensation. It was symbolic justice, a recognition of the betrayal she had endured. For Andrei, the verdict was devastating. His pride had been shattered, his reputation tarnished, and his finances crippled. The man who had once stood tall with confidence now faced the humiliation of defeat. The fine was not just a financial burden, it was a public declaration of his failure. The ruling marked yet another turning point in their saga. Elizabeth walked away with her head held high, determined to rebuild her life freed from Andrei's shadow. Andrei, however, was left to grapple with the consequences of his actions, burdened by debt and the stain of dishonor. The courtroom had spoken, and the echoes of the verdict would follow them both for years to come. What had once been a love story was now a cautionary tale. a reminder of how trust, once broken, can lead to battles that no amount of love can repair. When the courtroom doors closed and the verdict was delivered, Elizabeth and Andrei stepped into entirely different worlds. Their marriage was over, their battles had been fought, and now they faced the daunting task of rebuilding their lives apart. For Elizabeth, life after divorce was both liberating and challenging. She had spent 8 years caught in the middle of family conflict and marital strife, and now she was free to reclaim her independence. No longer bound by Andrei's demands or her mother's ultimatums, she began to focus on herself. Elizabeth leaned on her family for support, finding strength in the very people who had once pressured her to leave her husband. Their approval, once a source of conflict, now became a source of comfort. She threw herself into her career, determined to prove that she could thrive without Andrei. Work became her anchor, a place where she could channel her energy and rebuild her confidence. Friends noticed a change in her. She seemed lighter, more at peace. Though the scars of her marriage were still visible, Elizabeth also began to explore new opportunities, considering ventures that had once seemed impossible under the weight of her troubled relationship. Yet, despite her progress, Elizabeth carried with her the pain of betrayal. The lawsuit had given her justice, but it had also reopened wounds. She often reflected on the years she had invested in Andrei, questioning whether the love they shared had ever been enough. The memories of their wedding, their laughter, and their promises haunted her, reminding her that even the strongest love can collapse under pressure. Andrei's path, meanwhile, was far more complicated. Returning to Moldova had given him a sense of identity, but the financial burden of the $40,000 fine weighed heavily on his shoulders. His pride, once unshakable, had been fractured by the courtroom defeat. He struggled to rebuild his reputation, determined to prove that he was not the villain Elizabeth had painted him to be. His remarriage to an Indian woman offered him stability, but it also came with challenges. Andrei carried the baggage of his past into his new relationship, and whispers of his failed marriage followed him wherever he went. He poured his energy into business ventures, desperate to succeed and silence his critics. But the shadow of Elizabeth's lawsuit lingered, a reminder that his past could not be erased so easily. For Andrei, life after divorce was a battle for redemption. He wanted to prove that he could be a provider, a husband, and a man of honor. Yet, the scars of his first marriage made that journey difficult. His pride often clashed with reality, and his determination sometimes blinded him to the lessons he needed to learn. Elizabeth and Andrei's separate paths reflected the stark contrast of their personalities. Elizabeth sought healing and stability, while Andrei pursued pride and reinvention. Both were determined to move forward, but their journeys were shaped by the choices they had made and the battles they had fought. Their story, once intertwined, had now split into two distinct narratives. Elizabeth walked a path of resilience, supported by family and driven by independence. Andrei walked a path of struggle, burdened by debt and haunted by the past. Life after divorce was not easy for either of them, but it was necessary. The love that had once bound them together was gone, replaced by lessons learned and futures yet to be written. Every story leaves behind a legacy, and the tale of Elizabeth and Andrei Kastrovet is no exception. What began as a whirlwind romance on 90 Day Fiancé ended in divorce, lawsuits, and bitter separation. Yet, beyond the drama and heartbreak, their journey offers lessons about love, loyalty, and the destructive power of interference. For Elizabeth, the legacy of her marriage was one of resilience. She had entered the relationship with hope, believing that love could overcome cultural differences and family disapproval. But as the years unfolded, she discovered that love alone was not enough. Her loyalty was tested, her independence challenged, and her identity torn between husband and family. In the end, Elizabeth chose survival over sacrifice. Her decision to separate, to fight for justice in court, and to rebuild her life reflected a strength she had not always recognized in herself. Andrei's legacy was more complicated. To some, he was a man wronged by in-laws who never accepted him. To others, he was arrogant, stubborn, and unwilling to compromise. His pride, once his greatest strength, became his downfall. The Moldova dream, his vision of independence, was never realized in the way he had hoped. Instead, he carried the burden of financial defeat and the stain of dishonor. Yet, even in failure, Andrei's determination to start anew in Moldova showed his refusal to be broken completely. Together, their story became a cautionary tale. It revealed how cultural clashes can strain even the strongest bonds, how family interference can poison love, and how pride can blind partners to compromise. Their marriage was not destroyed by a single event, but by a series of choices, arguments, and ultimatums that built an invisible wall too high to climb. The legacy of Elizabeth and Andrei's relationship also speaks to the broader reality of love in the modern world. Relationships are no longer just about two people. They are about families, cultures, and expectations. When those forces collide, love can either grow stronger or collapse under the pressure. For Elizabeth and Andrei, the collision was fatal. Yet, their story is not without meaning. Viewers who followed their journey saw the raw truth of human relationships, the passion, the conflict, the heartbreak, and the resilience. They saw how love can inspire, but also how it can wound. They saw how loyalty can be tested, and how betrayal can leave scars that never fully heal. In the end, Elizabeth and Andrei's legacy is not just about divorce or lawsuits. It is about the lessons learned from a love that could not survive. It is about the strength to walk away, the courage to rebuild, and the reminder that sometimes letting go is the only way forward. Their story, though painful, remains unforgettable. It is a testament to the complexity of love, the power of family, and the consequences of pride. And as the final chapter closes, one truth remains clear. Elizabeth and Andrei's journey may have ended, but the echoes of their love and their conflict will linger for years to come. The story of Elizabeth and Andrei Kastrovet is more than just a tale of love and divorce. It is a journey through passion, pride, betrayal, and resilience. From the spark of romance on 90 Day Fiancé to the bitter courtroom battles that followed, their relationship revealed the fragile balance between love and loyalty, family and independence, trust and betrayal. Elizabeth fought to protect her identity, her career, and her family ties. Andrei fought to preserve his pride, his cultural roots, and his vision of a new life in Moldova. In the end, neither could compromise enough to save their marriage. Their love collapsed under the weight of interference, ultimatums, and unhealed wounds. Yet, their story leaves us with haunting questions, questions that linger long after the final gavel fell. Was Elizabeth right to prioritize her family's approval over her marriage? Or was Andrei justified in demanding loyalty above all else? Could their love have survived if pride had given way to compromise? Was the $35,000 lawsuit a pursuit of justice, or simply revenge born of heartbreak? And perhaps most importantly, what does their journey teach us about the limits of love when trust is broken? As viewers, we are left to reflect on these questions, recognizing that Elizabeth and Andrei's story is not just theirs. It is a mirror of the struggles many couples face when love collides with culture, family, and pride. Their legacy is not only about divorce or lawsuits. It is about the lessons hidden within the pain. That love must be nurtured, trust must be protected, and compromise must be embraced. Without these, even the strongest bonds can shatter. So what do you think? Was this the inevitable end of a doomed love story? Or could Elizabeth and Andrei have written a different ending? More update. 90 Day Fiancé. Elizabeth reveals Andrei asked her for divorce in their happy marriage. Elizabeth Kastrovet slams fake news about the passing of her late dad Chuck. It's shameful. And fans slam Andrei and Libby for dragging drama with Lauren on tell-all episodes. 90 Day Fiancé star Chuck Pothast passed away at 65. Daughter Elizabeth mourns tragic loss with a heartbreaking post. I will explain everything. While on 90 Day Fiancé, Elizabeth said that Andrei had approached her about the possibility of a divorce. A lot of people are upset at the pair because of all the trouble they've caused with Lauren and Alexei. Fans of the original series learned about their romance in season 5. She discovered him through a dating app. Libby helped Andrei get into the US by applying for a K-1 visa on his behalf. They remained Floridians, but he longed to return to Moldova with his loved ones. She had consented to accompany him on his vacation with their children at first, but their plans were derailed following a heated dispute. This led her to the conclusion that she and her children should go back to his country. Is a divorce in the cards? Yara surprised Elizabeth and Lauren at their business launch party in season 9 of 90 Day Fiancé, Happily Ever After. The fact that Andrei had secretly lost $75,000 in an investment in Moldova was revealed to his wife by her. During their journey to Moldova, he allegedly squandered the sum on a property that he admired. Libby was unaware of this detail, thus it caught her off guard. This led to an argument between her and Andrei. Rumor has it that Andrei entrusted Jovi and Alexei with his secret. Yara used the opportunity to reveal Andrei's relationship with Libby, as Alexei gave it to Jovi and he to Yara. Hearing the terrible news sent Libby teetering on the brink of tears. In the third part of season 9 of 90 Days to a Happily Ever After tell-all, Elizabeth revealed all that happened between Andrei and herself. The marital strife has officially started. Additionally, she revealed something unexpected regarding her divorce. The persistent tension with everything was brought up in her conversation with Lauren. Her estranged acquaintance had harmed her, she added. Libby and Lauren retreated to a secluded spot to have their chat. The second party requested it from the first. Concerning their differences, they were on the verge of an argument. As Andrei and Alexei were engrossed in their table tennis match, Andrei overheard his wife get angry. During her husband's difficult period, she made Lauren realize that he shaded her. Lauren accused Andrei and herself of hurting Libby. The revelation that she and Andrei had discussed divorcing last week brought tears to Libby's eyes. Her relationship had struck rock bottom, and she appeared to be about to break up. Either the difficulties have resurfaced due to the discussion of Moldova, or Andrei's narcissism is the main problem. Elizabeth was uncontrollable, despite Lauren's best efforts to appease her. She was completely taken aback by Andrei's contemplation of ending their marriage. The most devastating effect on Libby came from their breakup, even though she really wanted Lauren to remain by her side. Conversationally, nonetheless, the pals cared for one another. Elizabeth Castrovet slams fake news about the passing of her late dad Chuck. It's shameful. Elizabeth Castrovet, star of 90 Day Fiancé, is in disbelief at the amount of false reporting surrounding her dad Chuck's death. She blasted mainstream media for bringing their shameful level of reporting to an all-time low during a time of profound loss. Articles claiming unsubstantiated causes for her dad's death were criticized by the TLC star in a long Instagram post. After the terrible death of a beloved family member, Elizabeth and her entire family have been in grief. After revealing the tragic news on social media, she left her audience in shock. The reality TV star's father's sudden death quickly became a trending topic online. Libby, on the other hand, is really dissatisfied with the coverage of her father's death in the media. Tell me the truth. What gives her the right to criticize the media? Elizabeth Castrovet, star of 90 Day Fiancé, has been through a really difficult time in her life. She recently shared the tragic news of her dad Chuck's death in an Instagram post. An old snapshot of the reality TV actress with her dad, husband, and kids was released by the star. Our family was devastated by a tragedy that befell us 2 weeks ago, Libby wrote. She shared the news that her dad had gone to paradise, and now they must find a way to continue living without him. The TLC star reportedly chose not to discuss her father's death with anyone, according to TV Season and Spoilers. Chuck had surgery to fix his hernia a few months back. But according to other news sources, the reality TV star died of brain cancer. The loss of her father, Chuck Pothast, has devastated Elizabeth Castrovet to her core. She had no idea her father would pass away at such a young age. The reality star from 90 Day Fiancé wanted space to mourn alone. The dissemination of the false information online has greatly disappointed Libby. To put an end to the speculation regarding her father's death, she shared a narrative on Instagram. Any articles or reports circulating online are completely false, the reality TV star stated in response to the rumors surrounding her father. It was Libby's confession that she was horrified and disgusted. Publications publishing false information during this delicate period is deeply disheartening, she said. A screenshot of the People magazine story was tweeted by the reality TV personality, who vowed to sue. If the media would not remove the content, Libby threatened to bring charges against them. And another Instagram story was posted by the reality TV star, who shared her distressing experience of discovering false rumors circulating about her deceased father. But Elizabeth has already made it plain that she will not be silent on this occasion. Her admirers felt bad for her because she was going through a tough moment. They further urged her to combat the widespread false information online by pursuing legal action. After such a tragic loss, fans of 90 Day Fiance can only imagine the pain the celeb must be feeling. Witnessing so many individuals spreading rumors about Chuck's death shocked them. Because of his charming and generous nature, he has also always been the most beloved celebrity by his fans. Is this something you can get behind? Drop us a line and tell us what you think. 90 Day Fiance. Fans slam Andrei and Libby for dragging drama with Lauren on tell-all episodes. 90 Day Partner on tell-all of Happily Ever After Season 9. Viewers couldn't stand the prolonged drama between Andrei and Elizabeth, also known as Libby with Lauren. Since the reunion of the cast, things have gotten worse. Both Lauren and Andrei had already gotten furious at Libby for her unruly behavior, and they have a falling out. Libby and Andrei no longer consider Lauren and Alexei to be close friends. Andrei and Libby asked the pair to break off their relationship with Lauren immediately, even if they are still friends with Jovi and Yara, because he attempted to force his choice on them. Yara and Jovi were forced to watch what they said. Even Libby gave her husband unrelenting support without realizing how unhealthy it was. Now, what were Libby and Andrei doing to Lauren? Because of Elizabeth's deceptive remarks to Yara, Lauren and Elizabeth had a falling out in tell-all of 90 Day Fiancé. She made Yara think that Lauren had made a joke about her fancy clothes. Afterwards, Jovi's wife had to address Lauren since she sobs every time someone criticizes her appearance or sense of style. Lauren reassured her, though, that those weren't her words. Lauren lost the ability to refrain from accusing Libby of brainwashing Yara about her. Alexei's wife revealed Libby's true self to presenter Shane and her co-stars. "I have apologized to Libby 20 times, she said. She wasn't the one who told her that Lauren had called Andrei a bad person. But Yara even reached out to Libby to let everyone know. Libby insisted that she didn't lie about any of those things, though." One frequent viewer of 90 Day Fiance, Happily Ever After Season 9, commented on Reddit that Andrei and Libby don't need to continue to irritate Lauren. The pair from Florida continued to argue with her and make fun of her. Because his wife appeared unappealing during the postpartum period, he accused Alexei of stalking other women. Lauren defended herself and Alexei, claiming that this was not the reason she decided to get weight loss surgery. Rather, she felt motivated to pull in her sagging stomach. She went on to say that Andrei's accusation was false because she had previously told the world the truth. Thus, the original poster made the point that Lauren owed Libby's husband no explanation. Since it's Lauren's body, why would she justify the atrocities she forced herself to perform on it? In the message of their thread, the original poster said, "I felt bad that Lauren felt like she had to explain or justify this in depth. Her body, her choice," is a fantastic quote that they won. As a result, Andrei and Libby ought to cease their games with her. When Andrei's investment loss issue was not brought up in the conversation, one of the thread's commenters expressed their disappointment. If they were Lauren, they wrote, they would advise Libby to focus on her husband's finances instead of their own physical well-being. This season has been so long that some fans have termed it a pain, forgetting that the plots are fictitious. 90 Day Fiance star Chuck Pothast passed away at 65. Daughter Elizabeth mourns tragic loss with a heartbreaking post. Elizabeth Pothast, who stars in 90 Day Fiance, has recently lost a close relative. Her dad, Chuck Pothast, passed away suddenly, and she recently posted a heartfelt tribute to him. After sharing the terrible report on her family, the reality TV personality stunned viewers. After a long battle with cancer, Chuck was declared cancer-free in 2024. A few months back, he gave his supporters an update on his hernia operation, which took 8 hours. The TLC star was an integral component of the series for a long time. The audience wished Chuck a speedy recovery and wished him the best of health in the future. But the whole town is in shock after Elizabeth revealed new details about her dad. Tell me what she said. Did further health problems arise for him? For some time, Chuck Pothast concealed the fact that he was ill. Upon disclosing his battle with cancer a few years ago, fans of 90 Day Fiance were taken aback. Still, the reality TV personality hasn't had cancer since 2017. Afterwards, Chuck informed his fans about his most recent health difficulties. After undergoing 2 consecutive cancer procedures, he confessed to getting a hernia. The reality TV personality announced, "I'm having surgery tomorrow." Pothast asked his supporters to keep him in their prayers because he would be hospitalized for at least 5 days. "My hernia from the previous cancer was supposed to make my surgery about 3 to 4 hours long," he explained. However, his stomach had completely collapsed, so the doctors had to operate on him for 8 hours. Similarly relieved to be back at home after a brief hospital stay was the reality TV personality. Many in the 90 Day Fiance community are mourning the departure of Chuck Pothast, a beloved cast member. Elizabeth Pothast shocked her followers when she broke the terrible news on her social media account. A photo of the happily ever after actress with her father, husband, and children was released by the celebrity. Lily expressed her profound sadness, writing, "Our family was devastated by a tragedy that struck 2 weeks ago. Her devoted father had passed on to paradise," she told her audience. The TLC performer came clean about her struggles to find a way ahead without him. In her time of need, Elizabeth requested solitude and disabled commenting on her posts. Chuck has spent a considerable amount of time fighting glioblastoma, a type of brain cancer. Still, in 2017, after overcoming the illness, he triumphed. The reality TV personality kept tabs on his health by seeing a doctor every 6 months. Following his hernia repair, Chuck felt much better. During the procedure, he encountered numerous challenges. Reality TV star, though, was relieved to be back at home with his loved ones. Therefore, the news of Chuck's sudden death stunned the audience. They can empathize with Libby and her family's struggles. Their relationship was extraordinary, and she was always very attached to her father. Many viewers of 90 Day Fiance took to social media to express their sorrow and offer their best wishes for the family's speedy recovery. The main cause of the TLC star's death is still a mystery to them. No more today. What are you thinking about this gossip today? Let us know in the comments, and stay tuned by subscribing to our channel to get more updates like this. Thank you.